Let's join Kristine Berzina, who's a senior fellow at the German Marshall Fund of the United States, where she also heads its Russia task force. So welcome to DW. What's your thoughts on this, given what we've seen so far? War crime or faked images?
It's very clear from the international press presence, for example, that went in to Bucha also over the weekend, that this isn't a faked massacre. And satellite footage also confirms, looking down on Bucha, where some of the placement of these bodies were, that this is, there's other verification of the authenticity of these images and of these attacks. And the gravity of these crimes is really glaring for the international community, for the United States, for Europe. And it takes the moral outrage to a new level. So the questions that come next are what to do about it. Clearly, the existing sanctions and even the Ukrainian military victories of pushing the Russians back are not enough to stop this kind of behavior. So how does the West signal to Russia and to the Russian military, to those soldiers who are choosing to make such horrible, devastating crimes against women, against civilians of all kind, that they are wrong? And that's where the new rounds of sanctions that are being talked about for later this week come into play.
Right.
But also, it's just so horrible.
Let me just interrupt there, because we'll talk about what possibly those sanctions might be. But what are they for? Beyond punishing Russia, is there a consensus about what these sanctions should achieve? Because if their purpose is to end this war, people might ask, well, why have they waited to turn the volume up to 10, as it were?
The purpose of sanctions is a frequent topic of conversation, and even today, Jake Sullivan from the White House, talking about the potential for new sanctions, was using the terminology of raising the cost, of having costs against Russia for its behavior. So it is important for Russia to see that these actions in particular are not only seen and said, that is sad, too bad, but they will have a cost to Russia immediately. There's a longer term question, which is the war crimes piece, which is what President Biden spoke about and many European leaders have, which is the necessity to collect all of this evidence and then take this to either the International Criminal Court or a different venue that is not yet decided, in order to prosecute President Putin for these war crimes. That is a longer term process. The question is, what can be done this week?
Right.
Now that this is clear, how do you punish Russia this week?
Right. OK, so we're talking about potentially extending the sanctions that are already on the table. But however this war ends, in a deal or by one side bombing the other to a standstill and claiming victory, does Russia then just resume its former position on the international stage, on the UN Security Council, and go back to business as usual?
It's very hard to imagine how, after behavior like this, Russia can resume standing in Europe or in North America. Yet there are many countries that abstained from voting against Russia across the UN General Assembly. China is backing Russia still right now. And so Russia does have relatively normal business with a few countries, India, for example, big countries, India, the United Arab Emirates, China, places that have very healthy economies and that are seeking cooperation. So there, I could imagine business as usual, but I find it incredibly difficult to see how there can be normal relations between Russia and Europe or North America, other global democracies that have taken a stand against Russia right now, given these horrific actions. Which is, the question, would sanctions of some kind come down? At which point, what would be the conditions necessary in order to normalize? But I think we are very, very far from that. And when you look to Russian history, Russia has not had a process for reckoning with its misdeeds in the way that other countries have. In Germany, the Nuremberg trials and decades worth of educational reforms and conversation have led to a kind of social readjustment and understanding about the problems with the Third Reich. After South Africa, after apartheid, there were truth and reconciliation councils that again forced talking about and understanding the violations that happened. And yet Russia, after the end of the Soviet Union, does not have a policy of looking at the Stalinist era or prior imperial era through the various purges and deportations and hunger campaigns and famines and murders and mass arrests. None of that has been denounced. Truly, instead, Stalin is glorified by President Putin. The imperial history is glorified, and the same rhetoric of cleansing society is back in play. So what would need to happen in Russia for some kind of future normal relationship is for there to be a societal understanding of the unacceptability of this.
That's very clear. I hope we get to talk again. Kristine Berzina from the German Marshall Fund, thank you so much.
Thank you.